Lee, we all set?
Yeah, you can start now.
Welcome to the work session for Tuesday, November 16th. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
All right, welcome everyone. President Restanidi is absent tonight. Therefore, as pro tem, by default, I'm running the meeting tonight. Lee, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilman Scaringi,
Present.
Councilwoman Riley is absent. Councilwoman Friedman,
Present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
Councilman Strawn,
Present.
Councilman Scanlon,
Present.
and President Restanedi is absent. That's two absent. Riley and Restanedi.
Okay, let's start with RL 21-249. Margaret Myers, are you out there?
I am. All right, this is for low-income housing Woodburn Court 2. It's an extension of the agreement, which is expiring at the end of this year. They have a gross shelter rent that was at 5.62%, and we are going to change it to 10.5%. And it is just the extension, and that's it. And then changing the percentage rate.
Okay, council people, I cannot see you on my phone. I'm using the city issued phone. So if you have a question, please just state your question for Ms. Myers, please.
This is Sharon. I'm sorry to interrupt. The clerk's record should reflect that Angela Riley is present as of 6:02.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Any questions for Margaret Myers?
Yes, this is Councilwoman Friedman.
Sure,
Yes.
Councilwoman, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Margaret. How are you?
I'm good. What do you need?
Okay, so I read through this document and I was curious because I was provided the person who runs the company that manages Woodburn Court had reached out to me as the council representative in the district a few months ago and provided me with the old pilot, or the pilot that is functional until the end of this year. And so I didn't go through line by line and compare them, but it did look very, very different. There seemed to be a lot of information in that previous, or I should say current pilot, that's not in this one. I'm wondering, is this the full document? This is the only thing that we need to approve in order to extend this pilot agreement with Woodburn Court? Or are there further documents that we should keep an eye out for that are coming in the future?
You only need to do the extension agreement. The original agreement will be attached to it from when it was for 40 years ago. And we are just changing the percentage.
I see. And this is only a 10-year extension, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much.
Other questions for Margaret Myers? Thank you, Margaret.
No problem.
Frank, are you out there?
No, I don't see him down here.
All right, we'll move on then.
Actually, he's on his way down. He should be here in about 30 seconds.
Okay, we'll wait a second for him then.
If you'd like, we could probably squeeze in Charlie while he's
Yeah, it's all
walking
right.
down.
Mr. Pearsall, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
21-251 is you.
I'm here before you tonight with a request for legislation for two 2021 budget lines that are not right now, but will be over before the end of the year. The first of them is chemicals, J8130-54150. We're asking for a transfer in of appropriations of $150,000 for that one. And for the sludge and waste disposal, J 8130 54804, for an additional $75,000. With the funds coming from the personal services lines of J 8130 51000 of $225,000. We're experiencing a vast increase in some of the chemical costs. You know, we're affected by all the freight problems as well. And one particular one went from $7.52 a gallon to $14.41 as of our last bid. So we're just being crushed by some of the costs of the chemicals. The other one is our polymers. We only got control of the ActiFlow on August 24th this year. And before that, the people running it weren't buying the chemicals and they weren't being as diligent with them as our people are. So we've used more chemicals of polymer in the first 8 months of this year than we had budgeted for the whole year. So we're going to be behind.
Okay, Charlie, I have a couple of questions for you. So I think I know the answer to this, but
Sure.
why is there such a large allowance in the personal services line that we're able to pull that much from?
We still have 6 unfunded or unfilled positions.
Okay. And how long have they been unfilled? I believe we lost Charlie.
Apologize. I lost my connection there. I hope I'm back.
You're back now, Charlie. Yes.
Sorry, we have 6 unfunded or unfilled positions in the personal services lines. We are seeking applicants. We'll be coming for you with another amendment once we get the board to approve it to lower the expectations so we can hire people as trainees rather than looking for operators with qualifications because we're just not finding them.
Okay. How long have these positions been unfilled, Charlie?
They pop around. We've had some ins and outs, but a couple of them have been unfilled for 6 or 7 months.
Okay. All right. All these positions are in next year's budget still, right? I mean, they're in a,
Yes.
okay, all right. All right, so where you advertising for these people, Charlie? Where are you trying to get applicants from?
Well, we start out with the press. We also use, I believe, BinghamtonHelpWanted.com, and we go through civil service. We've reached out to Binghamton University and SUNY Binghamton.
Has there been any thoughts of going outside the area? To
We
try to get
could.
some applicants?
We're limited the way it stands now to the Broome County and the 5 neighboring counties for preference. But, you know, at this point, if we could attract anybody in from farther out, we'd try.
Okay. All right, thank you, Charlie. Any other questions for Mr. Pearsall? Hearing none. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah. Frank, are you with us now? Is that a yes? Lee, is he with you?
Yes, he's here. I think his mic is muted.
He needs to get close to the mic. Yeah, okay.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Yep, Franco, we can hear you now. So tell me about 21-250, please.
We're just looking to transfer $10,000 from the Barton and LaJudas agreement into to pay Shoemaker. And it's all part of the same type of work for the flood levy inspections from 2019.
All right, Franco, thank you. Questions for Franco?
This is Councilwoman Friedman. I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for being here. So my question is, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, that this appears that the supplemental agreement overestimated the cost by $10,000. Is that correct?
Yes, we just wanted to use that that additional $10,000, that $10,000 just to pay Shoemaker and not incur any more cost to this overall project.
Okay, sorry, now forgive me, I'm a little bit more confused now. So this is, you are asking for $10,000 more because the supplemental agreement overestimated, or wait, I think I'm confusing myself, sorry. The supplemental agreement underestimated by 10,000, so you need to increase it by 10,000?
Aviva, this is Chuck. Can I try to clarify this? Okay.
Okay.
We have an agreement with Barton LaJudas for like $210,000 that was approved back in February.
Right,
We're not going to need 10,000 of that, so we want to reduce that purchase agreement from 210,000 and change to 200,000.
okay, right, that was my initial read of this.
That's correct.
So, okay, and then where is that, so that's $10,000 that has not yet been spent or allocated? Like where would it go?
We're gonna
Or it doesn't have to go anywhere.
We're going to reduce the purchase order. We have basically $210,000 to do the project. We're going to reduce that purchase order to 200,000. And then the Shoemaker one will pick up the difference. I think it's like 9,000 and change.
I see. Okay, so we're taking the $10,000 from the Barton and LaJudas and kind of shuffling it around because the Shoemaker one was underestimated by about $9,000.
No, the Shoemaker one is the one that I think you are going to vote on tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that came
Got
down
it.
last
Okay.
work session. And
Got it.
there's not enough money in the line, and we're reducing the Barton LaJudas one by 10,000 for the Shoemaker money to be available.
I understand. Okay, thank you for explaining.
Other questions for Mr. Pearsall? I mean, for Franco, please. See none. Thank you, Franco. I know, Mr. Kruger, are you out there?
He's
Yes,
here.
sir.
All right, Jeff, tell us about 21-252, please.
I'm pretty much going to steal the same line from Mr. Pearsall from the sewage treatment plant. Chemical costs and those associated fees are continually going up. Pretty much every chemical company wanted a 30% increase. And if they haven't already attempted it, they will be attempting it at the beginning of next year. These cost escalations, we also have a slight increase to the amount of water produced. This led to us reviewing and revising our estimates for the end of the year needs of chemicals. And we are going to fall short unless we transfer a little bit of money over from a couple other lines into the chemical line.
Questions for Mr. Kruger? All right, thank you, Jeff, for your time. I appreciate it. On to Megan with 21-253, please.
Yes, thanks, Councilman Scanlon. So this is another side lot program sale. This one's to authorize the sale of the city-owned vacant lot at 110 Park Avenue to Jake Brigham, who is an adjoining property owner, for $350. That is the fair market value as determined by the assessor's office. Mr. Brigham's proposal would keep the lot green space, add fencing and plant trees, which is in line with the side lot program guidelines.
For those of you who may recall, Mr. Brigham was here, I believe, last year, and he bought the other side lot program. So now he has 3 lots. So good for Mr. Brigham. Any questions for Megan? Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Okay, standing in for Jared Cram, Mayor David's going to talk about 21-254. Mayor, you out there?
Yep, good evening, Councilman Scanlon. I don't have the agenda in front of me. The first one, is it the lease or the Evans Street Bay? Which one is first?
The first one is Evans Street Baseball.
Okay, so that's the lease. All right, thank you. Councilman Scanlon, we don't have new information to present on this. We provided the lease to members of City Council several weeks ago. I think we thought at that time we had also submitted the RL, but the RL did not accompany the lease at that time. So you have the lease already. You've had it for several weeks. There are no changes with any of the financial points or the business points in there. I do believe that Ken Frank has updated some of the legalese in conversations with the lawyers, but most importantly, I think I just wanted to really pass along that Corp Counsel believes that both the lease extension and the bond, which you're supposed to vote on tomorrow, both of those should be voted on at the same time, as they are related to one another. Obviously, the bond is referenced in the lease, and the two are connected. So you have the lease, and I don't believe there has really been any questions that has come to Chuck or Ken during the 2 or 3 weeks that we presented it.
Any questions on 21254? All right, Mayor, you mentioned the first one. Unless I have a not updated agenda, I only see one item for Jared Cram here.
There should be, Mr. Rogers, is the next one 7072 Court?
That's correct.
Okay. So I believe that there's probably an updated agenda.
Okay.
This is an update with regards to 7072 Court Street. That is the vacant green space owned by the city of Binghamton in the corner of Court and State downtown. The developer, Mark Yanati, has asked us to advance a proposal to city council. A little bit of background. This spans back several years and through multiple different councils, but his most recent proposal that he provided to the city is he is ready and in a position to move forward to build a 2-story building at 7072 Court Street with 10,000 square feet per floor. And the first floor would be commercial, and the second floor would be housing, market rate housing. And on the second floor, you're talking about 5 units, 2 2-bedroom units and 3 1-bedroom units. The overall cost of the project is approximately $3.4 million. And the developer is still able to utilize approximately $700,000 worth of state grants that had been accumulated through Empire State Development and the Greater Binghamton Fund over the course of several years. So we were approached, we have been in contact, obviously, with the developer over the course of many different years, helping them to try to advance a project at that site. While council had already approved this project, I believe Corporation Council felt that since there has been a change to the proposal, and that being going from, in essence, 5 stories to 2 stories, wanted to go back to City Council for review and approval. But I think you'll recall that we had done an RFP many years ago to solicit bids for this project. We have been working with this developer for several years, and it's a small, challenging, parcel of land downtown. And of course, this is one of many projects that have been impacted by COVID and the cost of materials, et cetera. But we think it's a great project, and I think it'll be great for downtown, having another mixed use building at that intersection. So we're very supportive of it. We're not asking, for it to be expedited or anything. We just wanted to bring the new information to City Council. We've asked for a rendering as well, and we will be providing that. There is a rendering that we expect shortly, and we will circulate that to City Council as well.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I did see this from Lee, as a matter of fact. I just didn't see it on my agenda. So, Mayor, maybe it's a question for Corp Council or you. I know like 4 years ago, I believe we approved a pilot, or there was a pilot approved for this. Is that pilot out of date? Does a new pilot have to come through because it's been so long?
That's a great question, actually. So with regards to the pilot, The developer will be advancing a pilot through the IDA. So in other words, they will be pursuing one of the standard pilots that are available to them through the IDA. What we had brought down several years ago was a deviated pilot. And as you know, a deviated pilot needs to be approved by both City Council and the IDA. At this point, we are not supporting or advancing a deviated pilot, and the developer is able to work with the IDA on a standard pilot, which does not require the city's approval. And to be clear, we support the developer's request for a standard pilot available to them through the IDA agency.
And that standard pilot is 10 years, right, Mayor?
There's actually a couple different options. One of them is 10 years, and I believe that there's also a 15-year one available to them. I am not sure which one that they are pursuing, but the more common one is the 10-year pilot, yes.
All right, thank you. Other questions for Mayor David on this? Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you. Oh, you can see me.
I just switched my screen. I can, yes.
Oh, great. Hi, thank you. Okay, so I tried to go on the GIS parcel mapper just to see if I could find out some history about the parcel, because I do remember, well, I guess when this pilot was initially proposed, we weren't on council yet, or some of us were not on council yet. And I know that it was being used as a green space. It used to have like benches and it's kind of landscaped. I'm wondering if there has been any thought about perpetuating that little, the GIS mapper called it like a town square, or I think Google Maps calls it a little town square, which is quaint. But has there been any thought of perpetuating the green space instead of developing it?
So good evening, Councilwoman Friedman. To your question, the history of that parcel, there used to be an approximately 7 or 8 story building there called the O'Neill Building that was at least 100 years old, if not longer, if not had been there for a longer period of time. It was demolished in approximately 15 to 18 years ago, give or take. I don't remember the exact year, but I do remember when the building was demolished. There had been efforts to save and rehabilitate the building, including by developer Mark Unati, who is the developer of this project. He originally had wanted to work to save and preserve and rehabilitate the O'Neill Building. But under the Ryan administration, I remember the building ended up becoming slightly detached from the building next door. There were safety concerns, and the building was ultimately demolished. So the history of that location had been that of a more of a commercial building. I don't believe that there was housing in it. I believe it was exclusively commercial at that time, and mostly vacant for the decades prior to that. So from that point in time to present, it had been used as a green space. We really did not have a lot of discussions about continuing it as a green space, especially as we're now advancing the project at the Metro Center to be that more kind of center city courtyard, which I think is good for the city and downtown to have. But now that that is advancing and near being finalized, we thought that this was a highest and best purpose for that space.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mayor David? I have on my screen, I can see Councilman Strong, Councilman Scringy, Councilwoman Friedman. I cannot see Councilman Burns or Councilwoman Riley, so don't feel offended if I don't call on you. Just speak up if you want to ask a question.
I'm here.
Joe, you have a question?
I don't, but I remember Drazen's store being in there too. So
yeah, I certainly remember that too. All right, thank you, Mayor David.
All right, thank you, council members.
Okay, Chuck, on to 21-255, please.
Twenty-one, 255 is a ordinance, an RL we're putting out to amend the 21 Gulf Fund budget. We're basically moving $16,000 from the management service account and transferring it to professional services and equipment repairs.
Questions on this for Chuck? All right, Chuck, tell us about 21-256, please.
21, 256 is an ordinance to amend the 21 fire budget. Basically, we're taking $7,561 out of their personal service account and moving it into their travel and training line. This is the
Question
cover.
for-
This is the
Go ahead.
cover, additional training for officers that are ongoing this year.
Questions for Chuck on 256, please.
This is Councilwoman Riley.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Yes, hi Chuck, how are you?
Good.
Good, good. So with this amount of money, $7,561, how many firefighters are being trained?
I believe this is either 4 or 5.
Can we get a concrete number to determine how
Sure.
many? Thank
Sure.
you. And this training is required for their advancement or for their just general continuing education?
Continuing education, when we hire them, we send them through schools to get trained.
Okay. Yes, I would like the numbers and the names of the firemen that are being trained. That would
Okay.
be great. Thank you.
Other questions on 256? All right, Chuck, 21-257.
257 is an ordinance to amend the 21 sewer budget to fund the sewage treatment line and increase overtime lines and using funds from the laborer's position. Basically, Jeff is here if we need him. The one sewer line is going to need around $8,000 in overtime, and the sewage treatment plant is going to be, the line there is going to be short $3,557. We will get that money back when we do the final bill at the end of the year. And we're moving it from an empty laborer's position.
Questions on 257 for Chuck? All right, Chuck, let's move to 258, please.
Okay, 258 is trying to take my time to walk through this whole thing with you. When we originally set up contracts with all the vendors at the sewage treatment plant back in the 2015-16 time period, part of that contract included DRB fees. Those are dispute resolution board fees. So if we have a dispute with a contractor before it ends up in arbitration or litigation, we agreed that we would run it through this dispute resolution board. That has occurred with 3 different vendors: PC Construction, Matco, and Quandel. As of this point in time, and I don't have the exact number on me, but I think it was $265,000 is what we've incurred that the owners have to pay with that. The contracts stated that the vendor pays 50% of the bill and the owners pay 50% of the bill. EFC agreed with these contracts when we originally submitted them. Now that we're submitting these charges to EFC, they are declining to make payments on it. Their statement is that's not part of the fees that they would normally bond for. I've tried to run this through our bond attorney with EFC and have not gotten anywhere over the last month and a half. So the city is going to have to find the funds to pay this since it can't come through the bonding tools. So what I'm asking to do is to pay these fees out of the general fund of the sewer fund. And when we get reimbursed from EFC, when we would submit these at the end of the year into the final bill process at the sewage treatment plant, and we would get reimbursed for part of these fees. Basically, what this is doing is it's putting it as an expense this year and not putting it as part of the long-term debt of the project. Johnson City is responsible for $120,000 of it, and I talked to them earlier tonight about the situation.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. Any questions on 258 for Chuck? All right, Chuck, thank you.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Bidwell, are you out there?
I sure am. How's everybody doing this evening?
Good, Lieutenant. You're up for 21-259, please, RL.
Yes, this is a $50,000 grant from DCJS to support the growth of the Binghamton Housing Authority's gang prevention program, to help purchase technologies in the form of cameras, computers, printers, and additional funding for training and payroll so that they can perform some outreach duties. This is no match, and the award ends March 31st, 2022.
Okay. Councilman Freeman has a question for you, Lieutenant.
Okay.
Hi, I do. Was this sent as a separate piece of legislation? Or no? I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble locating it.
It's on the bottom of your agenda.
Oh, it is on the bottom? Okay.
Yeah, right before pending legislation.
Okay, I apologize. For some reason, I need 1 second to find it. If anybody else has questions, you can go first.
Any other questions for Lieutenant Bidwell?
Just want to comment for the record that it is now Captain Bidwell.
Oh, Captain Bidwell, my apologies. Congratulations.
Trust me, I've been called a lot worse, so no apologies.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Captain.
Thank you, sir.
Congrats, Captain. Well deserved.
Thank you very much.
Okay, congratulations.
Thanks.
I know I read this, and for some reason I'm having trouble locating it. But I'm gonna see if I can remember what my question was. I was wondering if you could tell us more specifically about what this money will be used for. I know you said various equipment. Is this surveillance equipment, or is this, intelligence equipment? Can you just tell us a little bit more about what it will be used for, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this grant this isn't a police grant. This is a grant that was written by the Housing Authority, but we just managed the grant for them through the city. So all we're really doing is doing the quarterly reporting on it. And so when they make the purchase, they'll provide us with the receipts and everything. And then we will do the quarterly reports. But as of right now, looking at the budget line that they gave me, and without obviously purchasing anything, they have on here computers. They looking to purchase 20 computers, printers and toners and cartridges. They have 6 security cameras. I don't know if that's for their building or for any of the housing buildings they have. They have some training for staff, so active shooter training, gun violence and consultant. And then they also have payroll for staff to conduct additional outreach programs.
Okay, so this equipment, if I'm understanding correctly, this is kind of administrative equipment to help the functioning of the program, but it's not going directly to the program itself, the gang prevention program?
Yeah, so this was a grant written by the Housing Authority and the money, the payroll is going to their gang prevention stuff. So they also have on here like two We Fit sports packs and controllers, which I'm assuming is for the kids. And then the 20 computers, which without direct knowledge to it, but I think they have a computer training place on Exchange Street. So that they bring kids over there to work on the computer. So, and I'm just making an assumption that that's what it's for. But I'm just the management per. All I'm doing is the managerial side of this. This is a grant that will make, and then I'll just do with the reporting on it.
Okay, I see. Yeah, because I would be curious to find out, because in my mind, there's a big difference between computers and security cameras that will be used for surveillance versus computers that would be used for kids to provide alternative activities and enrichment that would then reduce their participation in gangs. So I would be quite curious to learn what specifically that equipment is planning to be used for.
Yeah, and so if you look at, and I'm just going to go off of 100 Moeller or 150 Moeller, and I believe the same as on the south side. They do have some security cameras along the building, and I don't know if they plan on replacing. They have 6 down here on the budget line they gave me. So I don't know if they plan on replacing or put an additional, but just from a camera, in my expertise, they wouldn't need 20 cameras to run security cameras. They could do that off of one computer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you said that this is coming from the Housing Authority. So would you recommend that maybe I reach out to them to find out more of why?
Yeah.
Like,
so the
more
Housing Authority, Megan Corey would be the point of contact to speak exactly what they're going to purchase with it.
Could you repeat that person's name, please? I didn't hear what you said.
Yes, Megan Corey.
Oh, Megan. Okay, perfect. All right, great. Thank you so much.
You're very.
Other questions for Captain Bidwell? Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Okay, Catherine Cheeseborough, you're out there?
I'm here.
All right, Catherine's going to discuss the stadium district updates for us.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. My name's Catherine Chesbro, often mispronounced as Cheesebro, and you can imagine that my nickname for many people is Cheese, but that is beside the point.
My apologies.
That's okay. So I'm here with my colleague, Michelle Palmer from Whittam Planning and Design, and we have been working since earlier this year on the Stadium District Master Plan, and would like to share with the group the progress that we've made since we were all last in touch about this project. And just wanted to say that we really appreciated and benefited from the input that we got from council during the last work session that we presented the draft during. And that helped us to refocus the plan since we met, we have had a public input meeting at the library that was quite well attended. We had 29 people there, and as well as staff. So we heard pretty loud and clear that housing was a big priority for residents, both to preserve what's there and also to add more affordable and moderate income, as well as some percentage of market rate housing, depending on what the market will bear. So we don't have too much time on the district for the district update on the agenda, but thought that we could do a kind of quick page turn to orient everyone on the shape that this is starting to take. So we begin with an overview of our process and how this came to be. The city really put this together following the great success of keeping the Rumble Ponies team in Binghamton. And then we define things like our scope and what's included in what we're looking into, as well as defining what a master plan is, and the process that we have gone through to establish goals and obtain public input, analyze information, develop consensus, and what the outcome will be, and The outcome is a long-term planning document that the city will hopefully use for a number of projects that will come out of this. And hopefully we'll see these make their way into individual projects that all add up to this vision for a district. So then we get into defining the context of the project area. The boundary has been slightly changed since you last saw it and now includes the transportation center, which made sense as part of the walkability and multimodal goals, as well as thinking about the visitor experience to the district, not only to the stadium, but also the regional bus traffic that goes through that area and the important role it plays for transit in the city. We did an overview of how the district has changed over time, which is quite fascinating. Quickly, the district has experienced a lot of change following the urban renewal efforts that were done. This is an image taken as recently as 1966. This is just across the street from the Kilmer Building. This building here is the railroad, the building that many are familiar with. So this block is where the post office is. So the district has changed quite a bit over the generations, and we often look to the past as we look toward the future. There will be an expanded historic district that the city and others are working on that will make tax incentives more available for redevelopment projects. More history about past planning efforts. We did a quick inventory of some of the recent planning efforts that the city has undertaken within proximity to the district, including the new fire station within the district, as well as things like the Columbus Park improvements and Youth and Community Center, the Kaufman Incubator, the Deco District Streetscapes Project, Water Street. You know, all of these things are quite close to the district, but not within it. Did an inventory of the existing zoning and defined the project goals, as well as a working list of terms and definitions. We looked at the existing conditions and the assets and public destinations in the district, and talk about how those assets really contribute to the quality of the district and what it's like for human services, what businesses are there, what open spaces are there within the district. Centennial Park, there's a open space owned by the library, as well as a vines garden, and the open spaces that are close, as well as some of the urban canopy that's there, which is quite limited. The walkability maps, just demonstrating how walkable the district is in terms of distance, and these distances could be improved, as you'll see, with streetscape projects that make this a more attractive walking experience. And then we got into some of the challenges and opportunities that are here. We did a pretty thorough streets inventory, and there are a number of very wide crossings across the roads that could be looked at for a more safe and enjoyable pedestrian experience, particularly on Henry Street. We developed this diagram of potential parcels to be looked into further for housing of different types in the district, whether those are renovations or new construction. We can come back, by the way, to any of these as we go. I just want to give an overview. We did a streets and traffic analysis with a subconsultant of ours. The findings quickly were that there are many streets, especially Henry Street, that are quite oversized considering the traffic that they do experience. So spatially, there is room to do improvements in the future to that street to accommodate more pedestrian space and public space and so on, while still accounting for the needs of the traffic in that area. We looked into safety concerns. Those mostly come to lighting and pedestrian crossings. That was kind of the limits of our scope, and looked at the surface parking that is extensive within the district, just the amount of pavement that is present where buildings once stood is quite a lot, and it contributes to the sense of disconnection between the downtown core and this area of downtown. We're still developing the narrative for this area, but the district is not within floodplains, although it does experience inundation during some of the more recent flood events that have happened in Binghamton, which is an opportunity for things like green infrastructure. This chapter summarizes the public outreach process that we've done to date, including the online survey that we got over 400 responses on, the trends of what we were hearing. When we met last, we talked about some of those survey responses and the different groups that we've met with since then. And we have an overview of what we heard during the public meeting that was held at the library in early October, and the general takeaways that we got from that conversation. Some of the stakeholders in the area that we have met with separately in one-on-one and site visits, and just a compilation of what we heard during those meetings and how those should be prioritized and how those have made it into the master plan proposals. The master plan proposals is the chapter that we're still working on the most. It's an important chapter, so we want to get it right. So we begin with how we can enhance assets. And so we define the goals, recommendations, and potential projects to do that. So we have those defined as of now for public destinations, as well as open spaces and businesses, human services, and then proposed solutions to challenges. We begin with streetscapes, connectivity, and enhancements to walkability, goals, recommendations, and potential projects. The potential projects for this really focus on Henry Street, as well as other streets for lighting and so on. Housing is a major part of this, and here's another copy of that diagram here. So some of the goals are to improve the housing quality and availability for residents at the affordable, moderate income, and some market rate housing through new development and housing renovation. We recommend prioritizing parcels for redevelopment. You know, I don't need to read all of these. You do have a copy of this, but really setting policies that prioritize homing residents already living in the district, incentivizing projects that provide home ownership opportunities at a range of affordability levels. And these recommendations have been informed from our meetings with several local housing organizations such as First Ward Action Council, Metro Interfaith, Greater Opportunities, and a number of really great organizations that are doing a lot of important housing work in the region and have a very good track record for that. Then we get into transportation and traffic recommendations. So from the traffic study, we recommend right-sizing the streets. We've learned from that Henry Street can be reduced to one lane going in either direction. So that gives us, as you can see here, a significant amount of room to potentially change while still accounting for the turning radii and other needs of traffic demands in that area. Safety, to promote the real and the perceived safety in the district. We talk about lighting, physical improvements, and just encouraging outreach and collaboration between community organizations, residents, and the police department. We have not had extensive conversations about those, about safety as of yet. And if there are specific thoughts on your part, that might be interesting to talk about. Surface parking, we essentially would discourage further additions of surface parking lots in this district and instead promote alternatives to personal vehicles. One potential project for that could be to look into the possibility for things like a car sharing program, as well as adding on-street parking wherever possible, using paved space on the street for parking as opposed to adding more surface parking lots where there could be buildings, for example, or open spaces. Undeveloped parcels, basically just thinking about infill. Sustainability really focuses on the potential for green infrastructure in this area, thinking about how this area is not within a floodplain, but the stormwater that is generated in this area could be mitigated as part of a green infrastructure approach to decrease that effect elsewhere, as well as things like solar panels, electric vehicle charging, and so on. Then we get into some research and case studies. As we mentioned, we've been meeting with a number of local organizations that are giving us some great ideas for potential housing projects, as well as the structure of how some other housing projects are currently being put together, such as the Water Street parking garage and housing redevelopment project, because that is on city land and there is the potential for city land even to be a development site as part of this project, namely next to the stadium. Regarding zoning, we generally feel that it could be updated to reflect the aspirations of this district and to allow a little bit more flexibility for mixed use and potentially adding density where appropriate, but adjusting the zoning so that Henry Street is allowed to develop into a kind of mixed use corridor with housing and businesses near each other. And these are ever so slightly out of date, but these are zoom in plans of the project areas from our master plan. So this shows the Henry Street section where you can see a number of curb bump outs, lighting on the street for a placemaking effort, improvements to the plaza that's there, and potential infill in the future, and on-street parking. And then as we go further, more on-street parking, additional open spaces, and potential redevelopment or infill development in some of the blocks on Henry Street. And thinking about the future of this parcel that is owned by the post office as a potential site for housing, mixed use, similar to what was there. The density of what was there was some of the densest and most ornate buildings in the city. So thinking about that for the future of that site. Zooming in a little more, we will update this to include more of a streetscape approach for Prospect Ave and incorporating the Lewis Street as well. And this area shows Pine Street, which we aren't showing too much of a change except for some of the curb bump outs to make crossing the street safer and easier to slow traffic. We're also thinking, based on resident feedback, of the potential for speed humps on the street. But this sort of node at Fayette and Pine Street could be developed with additional infill for just businesses in existing buildings to bring more activity in kind of a pocket of activity in this more residential area. I think that's pretty close to the end. The rest of the report are the appendices, including a copy of the traffic analysis, some of our interview notes with stakeholders, all of the survey data, and the transcription of the public meeting comments. And what's not included yet, but will be in the future, is a project matrix that reflects a planning level budget for some of these ideas for consideration as part of future planning. So that was a quick overview, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm sure there's questions, council people. Just start. If you're ready, go ahead.
Hi, this is Councilwoman Friedman.
Yes, Council.
Thank you. All right. Hello. Thank you so much for that thorough report. I think, you know, this overall looks great. I was also, I have to say, excited that you you put in that illustration from 1882, the exact one that's actually hanging right behind me. I was like, I know that. So my one concern continues to be housing, and I appreciate that whole section on housing development. And I have to apologize. We got this in our email inboxes yesterday, so I didn't have a chance to thoroughly go through everything. My big concern is just that in developing the housing and improving the housing quality, there's a delicate balance to avoid gentrifying the area, right? Gentrification meaning that since it becomes a quote unquote nice area, landlords will often price out tenants and you know, they'll like refuse to renew the lease, and then they'll make the rent more expensive so that the current tenants can't afford it, et cetera, et cetera. There's a delicate balance with that, because on the other hand, you also don't want to relegate people to living in poverty or substandard housing or ugly housing that doesn't inspire pride in the neighborhood. So, you know, it is a delicate balance. So with all of that being said, I do appreciate the care given to the, you know, and that you are listening to the constituents and the residents here when they're saying that this is a big concern. And I was wondering if you have any, or maybe this is, I'll just ask my question. Have you given any thought to mechanisms or specific strategies in how to not gentrify and price out the people who are already living here?
So as you say, it is a delicate balance. And I think I'll say a few things and then give Michelle the opportunity. I think, Michelle, you and I have talked about this a lot as we've been talking with all of the stakeholders. There are a couple of different factors that make the housing conversation nuanced here. We're hearing that residents do not want to be displaced. At the same time, we're hearing pretty much across the board, no matter who we meet with, for specific properties, particularly on Henry Street, for those residents to be removed. And, you know, nobody, we don't know where. So taking a nuanced approach to keeping people in place, however, there's this, there are people interested in some of the residents being relocated, is a process. So one of our recommendations might be that with additional affordable housing and additional home ownership opportunities, that this area, especially on Pine Street, returns to what it once was a more healthy, you know, owner occupied, but still working class neighborhood. That trend over the past few decades has turned more toward landlords who have differing maintenance standards.
That's so kind of you to phrase it that way.
Well, the maintenance standards have led to some houses that have become impossible to economically improve. And so those have turned into surface parking lots. And so it becomes a cycle. So one way to address that is to improve home ownership and to make sure that any new development accounts for affordable and moderate income housing. We've also heard that there is a real concentration of supportive housing in downtown Binghamton specifically. And so it is our recommendation that additional affordable housing is not added to this district, that instead more people that don't have specific needs live here, because the trend has been that the people that have supportive needs are living in downtown, and young professionals, families, retirees, other people of different age groups and demographics do not live downtown. So this area would be a different place if we start to encourage people of different backgrounds beyond those who, and keep the supportive housing here. We know that those are excellent organizations that take very good care of their residents, but that it would be beneficial for everyone if we don't continue the trend of adding more supportive housing in downtown. That is a trend that many downtowns have experienced over the past several generations, and we see the opportunity for it to stop. Michelle, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. We had some very interesting conversations, as Kate mentioned, with groups like the First Ward. And what we heard was that rehabilitation of existing buildings with the use of grants and different kinds of tax incentives is one of the few ways that the kind of renovation that you might like to see happen can happen here. If it's simply market rate with landlords, you get the very mixed bag. And so encouraging, those groups often do renovation towards long-term rental, but they do sometimes do renovation towards sales to first-time home buyers and affordable homes. And so, as Kate mentioned, we think that having more owner-occupied homes in the district would help, again, diversify the demographics. And rather than building like very new high-end housing, which there might be a place for some of that, largely thinking about more rehabilitation of the buildings that are there.
Yep. So these are nuanced conversations, and just as a reminder that we are coming from a place of urban planning. This is an urban plan that is dealing with the built environment, but some of the housing issues are sort of social and economic. So we are doing what we can within our scope to make recommendations, but to continue looking into this, perhaps the housing study would be needed. But perhaps not. You could just take it project by project and add houses for these groups that we've mentioned that would really benefit from that.
Mm-hmm. And who would be responsible for doing an in-depth housing study?
You'd probably, depending on the scope of it, you'd probably put an RFP out, and
okay,
qualified firms would respond to that.
And
But I'm not saying that is what you need to do. We are putting together a menu of projects that could be done, and that's not required, but
But we're this particular study, and what we are skilled at is physical planning and understanding urban design. We are not economic development planners, and so that would be a different kind of planning with people who have more skill in understanding the economics of these kinds of situations.
Yeah. With all of that said, we've done a pretty thorough dive into the parcels that are out there and the properties that people are talking to. This is showing, city-owned land in the dark purple. This is a federally owned land, but it seems like a quite underutilized parcel. The properties on Henry Street that come up in a lot of meetings are on the market, and those are shown here as potential for redevelopment of those buildings. Sounds like there's a project on the way on Court Street that will be affordable housing. And then other privately owned parcels, these are in blue, those are what we would recommend are prioritized for any future housing studies for new construction and or renovations. So spatially, if this would all come to be, it would do a lot for the cohesiveness as well as the housing availability in the neighborhood.
Mhm. All right, well, thank you for all of that information. And I'm glad that I think we can all agree that this is a nuanced and, intense sometimes conversation to have because, right, there's a lot of ways to look at this. Economic development is sometimes in opposition to affordable housing, and so there are competing interests here. So the reason why I'm asking questions like who's responsible for a housing study is just because I think that these are questions that deserve to have deep dives, because there are people's lives that are going to be affected by this potentially. So that's the place where I'm coming from. And I look forward to having a chance to read more thoroughly through this report that you've provided for us. So thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Chesbro?
Councilwoman Riley has her hand
Yes,
up.
this is Councilwoman Riley.
Councilor Riley, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Chesborough. Thank you again for coming and providing such a great overview of this information. Now, the timeline you shared previously is based upon the council's prioritization of the recommendations in this document, correct?
Councils, sorry, I'm thinking about your question.
What happens next?
Okay, yeah. We anticipate being back in front of the council during the business meeting on the 8th of December and would anticipate that being the final approval of the document. Is there more to talk about there?
Councilwoman, if I could, this is Tito Martinez with the Planning Department. We could have an RL at the next work session with the expectation that that would be signed out for December 8th, hopefully for the adoption of the final plan. And you would get a copy of that final plan, obviously, before that happens.
Thank you. That was pretty much my question. So then the zoning board would be responsible for looking at this document, then prioritizing a list in terms of the city's approach to addressing addressing the recommendations within this proposal.
We could refer this to the Planning Commission. We could refer that final plan to the Planning Commission and have them draft a memo for you if that's sort of what you would like.
No, I just wanted to know the next steps in terms of what has been planned and thought out, because we won't. So for example, all of the recommendations that are in this proposal, the city cannot afford. We can't go in.
Oh, I see.
We're going to do everything that's here. Someone has to strategically plan and determine how we're going to best proceed. And who is in charge of that?
So, Kate, I can just say something really quickly, and then you guys can add if you like. So once the plan is adopted, we will have a set of proposals that we can then go after funding to implement. So the purpose of the plan would be to then go after state or federal funding and say, here's a project that we have in mind. If the grant, if the state or federal government is offering a grant that applies, where that project would be a good fit, we could then go after funding to implement that project. So the first step would be adoption of these conceptual ideas. Then we can go after funding, and then we bid specific projects out once we get funding.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mr. Martinez. That was great, not only for the council members, but for those watching that may be interested in the steps as well. This question is for our clerk. Where is this document housed so that residents can have access to it?
Well, it was circulated to council. It's being live streamed to YouTube as we speak. If you'd like, we could try and post this to the website under today's meeting.
Yes, that's what would be necessary because you can't flip through a YouTube.
Okay. It's possible the document is too big. I'd have to check with IT first.
Okay, thank you.
We can try to make it so that it's not too big. Just let us know.
Thank you. And now if
Thank
we
you.
do have further questions, Ms. Chesborough, I believe we have your contact information, correct?
You should. And if not, we're working very closely with Tito and others in the planning department. And as we look toward the meeting on the 8th, we'll be working on this quite a bit. So we'd really appreciate any follow-up that you might want to have on this.
Thank you again for the presentation. That concludes my question.
Other questions for Ms. Chesborough?
Mr. President Pro Temp.
Yes, Councilman Scraden.
Thank you. Catherine, Michelle, thank you so much for the presentation this evening. While you're still sharing your screen, would you be able to please go to page 43?
Sure.
Thank you. So you had mentioned that through your analysis, there's an idea for Henry. So I'm assuming this is from, say, from Shenango down through Chapman, to go down to one lane.
One lane going in either direction.
Correct.
Yep.
So may I ask where you got the traffic data to come to that decision?
Sure. We have it in the appendix. We have the full report. So
Right.
we worked with GTS Consulting,
Sure.
and they did the counts and looked at data provided by BMTS, and looked into these alternatives and ultimately saw that based on we have a kind of cover letter in the appendix that summarizes all of this. So this goes into their study parameters. But the biggest finding was that traffic is not a limiting factor for any enhancements to streetscape, that the streets are oversized, particularly Henry Street.
So my question is, over time, as this plan gets implemented within the stadium district, as more housing, more restaurants, and more amenities are implemented and built, by definition, there's more traffic, whether it's vehicles, pedestrians, or whatever. So does this analysis take that into account?
Well, Michelle, do you
I
wanna-
can jump in, sure. I think that the analysis cannot take into account what they don't know is going to happen for sure. What he was able to take into account is what was there now, and in fact, it's very low volume traffic. he did take counts on a normal time, and then he also took counts on an evening when the Rumble Ponies game was happening. So that much was included. And one of the things we found out from the planning staff was, we were asking the question, why was Henry Street so wide? And in fact, we were told that when urban renewal happened, this was seen as hopefully becoming an industrial hub with a lot of truck traffic and industrial traffic that never came to fruition. And so it was over-designed in the first place for what is actually happening here on the site. So I am not a traffic expert, but from what we heard from the traffic engineer, even narrowing the street down to 2 normal lanes in each, 1 lane in each direction, there would still be plenty of capacity for what could be anticipated as traffic. I don't think, I'm not hearing from anyone that the development in here is going to be huge, intense. What we would recommend is that the residential neighborhoods, particularly along Pine, some of the side streets, stay as they are, as largely single family housing or duplex housing, and that it's really Henry to be focused on as a commercial street.
Right. I understand the idea, particularly with projects of this nature, that we want to increase things like walkability and public transit and things like that. But I know, at least for myself, I can speak to the fact that when I speak to constituents in the city, particularly the elderly population, being able to get access to places like this in the city with their own personal vehicles is important. So walkability and alternative forms of transportation are good, but I don't necessarily know if that's mutually exclusive with decreasing the traffic flow of personal vehicles, right? Because there are some variables that can be estimators, right? So for example, if we're estimating that n number of housing units are going to go in, assuming, even if you did a conservative estimate of just 50% of the people owning a car, right? Just to make it incredibly conservative and not say 1-to-1, for example. I would tend to think with adding housing, adding restaurants and things like that, that probably would increase the traffic flow quite a bit, not even withstanding what exists in the district already.
There's a balance. As we
there is
kind of
yeah.
talked about with the housing, there's a balance to find there. But here it's to the extent possible, if we can encourage people to walk a block or 2 or 3, if they can, if they're able to, but also to account for things like easy access for loading of commercial properties, as well as accessible parking and things of that nature. What we're seeing in the district now are large parking lots that are usually empty, like most of the time, and large streets that are usually devoid of traffic.
Right.
So this is a conceptual plan. I just pulled up the Henry Street section, but there's a way to design an urban environment that is full of activity and at capacity when things are really busy, but that don't have these empty spaces when they're not.
And there's a concept called complete streets, and we need to say a bit more about this in the report. But complete streets mean that there's walkable spaces, there's space for bicyclists, but they also function well for cars because it's a street, so it has to work well for everybody. But I think that there's the current condition prioritizes cars and does not prioritize people. And so we'd like to get that with our recommendations more in balance.
No,
yeah,
forgive me. That balance makes total sense. But again, so you're talking about accounting for a balance of more diverse modes of transportation where vehicles currently are in a P1 slot, and to account for additional, hopefully used more modes of transportation, the rationale is let's decrease the width of the road. Like, do you see where I'm coming with that? So I get that there's a balance. I just, these aren't mutually exclusive ideas.
No, they're not.
Yeah. Speaking of parking spots, are there, do we know how many potential handicap parking spaces are going to be accounted for?
We haven't done that detailed of an analysis. This is a concept plan, and a parking allocation is not quite the level of detail that we'd be going into. Most of the design that we're doing is on public streets because the what happens on private developments is partially up to them. Although we would recommend as part of the zoning updates that there is no minimum parking requirement. We have seen that as a standard in urban areas. So it might become a standard that you have to park your car in a garage a couple blocks away because you may not use your car more than a couple times a month. We know that this doesn't, that different lifestyles use cars at a different time of the day. Everyone has different needs, but
sure.
Yeah.
But the one thing we are recommending that would be a change to add, it's interesting, in some places there seems to be an excess of parking, but in other places there's not quite enough parking. And so adding on-street parking, using some of the lane width to develop parallel, and perhaps some places even pull-in parking right on the street where people might most need it, close to a business, for example, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, the idea of putting on-street parking, I think that's a great idea, especially for small businesses and stuff like that. I think that's awesome. I just don't know if in the final analysis of wrapping this final draft up together, if this is maybe something you might be able to look into more and maybe touch on as we get closer to you guys coming back on December 8th. Just something I wanted to put out there.
We could certainly express your concerns to the traffic engineer and see if he has some words of wisdom, some additional information that he could give us.
I appreciate that. Thank you both.
Councilman, just to address your question about handicap parking, where parking is developed, the zoning code does require a certain proportion be handicap accessible.
Awesome.
That would be sort of built in.
Thank you so much, Tito. I appreciate that.
Other questions for Catherine? Thank you both for your presentation. We look forward to more information from you at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Also on the agenda is discussion about next year's calendar. I'm going to hold off on that until President Rasanetti's here. We have 2 more work sessions to go over this, so there's plenty of time. So put your comments together about that. We'll address the next work session. Next deal is pending legislation. Look through there. See if there's anything you want to discuss. We can certainly discuss. Or if not, just look through there for a minute. I'll give you a minute to do that.
This is Councilwoman Riley.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Yes, we do have pending legislation that I did request some information about the assessment and the prioritization, how we are prioritizing the pipe project. That's on our pending legislation. Is Chuck still here? Is he still on? Did anyone receive the documents that Chuck said he would send? Because I did not. I see, Phil, you're saying no, you didn't get it.
This
Okay.
is Councilwoman Freeman,
No.
I have not received it.
I didn't see anything on that. No.
Somebody spoke up there.
I was just answering your question, at least for me personally, I did not see anything regarding the street pipes and the under, the infrastructure underneath the streets type stuff.
Hey, can you get with Chuck tomorrow to make sure he gets that information to us, please?
Yes, I can follow up with Chuck in the morning and I'll copy council.
Thank you. Anything else on pending legislation you want to discuss? Or anything else you want to discuss?
You know what? This is Councilwoman Friedman. I just have a comment. There's a piece of legislation, the development of the LDC for the Water Street parking garage. And I held this over last work session because there was some language that I did not feel comfortable with. For example, some of the issues that I brought up were the fact that there was no specific language about the term limits. And also I did not like that some of the proposed members were written by name in the legislation. So I was wondering if I'm just thinking logistically, how would this work? Would we amend it at the meeting tomorrow? No, we can't because it's second read legislation, actually, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so then I'm wondering procedurally, how could my concerns be addressed?
You certainly have time tomorrow to discuss your concerns, obviously, when it comes up.
So at this point, since it's held over, we can only vote yes or no on that legislation as it exists?
Sure, and jump in here, but I believe that's true.
Correct. Okay. I see.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, Aviva, or for example, council members can make a motion to amend on the floor.
Okay.
What we did last time, but we said we
Right.
wanted to bring it back to work session to discuss it as a council.
Chuck, are you on here still?
I don't believe Chuck is still here.
And I don't recall, was the motion to amend withdrawn pending discussion? Is that how it shook out?
That was on different legislation, but it was similar in terms of us trying to revise the language within legislation that was then held over. So we have a few that are pending, that one of which was, we were going to talk about tonight as well, but we did, Councilwoman Friedman did propose verbiage changes to the verbiage that we then said we would talk about tonight surrounding the money with the land bank. So it was similar to this one.
Okay, my suggestion would be as council members to circulate proposed amendments or questions and then potentially make those amendments on the floor tomorrow. Otherwise, you would be voting yes or no on the existing or on the motion to amend and in that form.
I see. Okay, so I could send that out tonight. I could type that up and send that out tonight, my proposed amendments, and then council could vote to pass the legislation as amended or incorporate the amendments that I propose. I guess accept or reject, hopefully accept.
Yeah, either accept or reject, but also potentially, via email correspondence, take a look at the amendments you've proposed and then either make the motion on the floor to amend, as you've said, or amend in some other fashion and vote on it as amended.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you for that information. And I intended to do this yesterday, but technical difficulties, of course, that's the tagline of 2021. Okay, so I am happy to start an email thread as soon as we get off of this meeting.
My suggestion is please include Maggie, and I think the question was addressed to me. Maggie would be just as sufficient at handling it, but please include Maggie and Ken, myself and Brian Seacrest, and one of us will try to assist to the extent that the majority of council wishes to amend.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Okay, is there any other discussion on pending legislation or anything else?
Okay, so similarly, regarding the language surrounding the land bank funds, how many of you, did any of you also reach out to Jess to discuss what we discussed? Do you have anything you want to share before we start corresponding via email, since now today is Tuesday and we're voting tomorrow? Oh, wait, I'm not the chair. I have to give that to Tom.
No, that's fine. Angela, you're fine. So, I mean, if anybody did reach out to Angela, I did not myself personally. If anybody did reach out, please speak up.
I talked to Jessica.
Okay.
She just said it'd be very difficult. I mean, she's open to ideas, but she just basically said the program is working very well. All the people that they've served so far are still living in their houses. It'd be hard for them to change the nature of the program. And she went through, and she said she'd be happy to, I mean, I don't know if she can participate in a business meeting, but she threw out some statistics that I still want to delve into a little bit more, but they do a lot of work statistically with the affordability part. And meaning if it gets too low and somebody simply can't afford it, then the house could go back the other way. And they're very concerned about that. They're not, she's not saying that that's not a concern broadly, but with this program, if the affordability, if the person can't afford even, basic upkeep and taxes and stuff like that, then the property could go the other way. And there's a concern there as well, that the ultra low, to work with, but their program as it's set is highly statistical in getting it down as far as they can, as far as low income and stuff like that. So she definitely has a concern that it would be hard and that they might not even be able to accommodate that portion of the funding, and that the funding might sit and not help anybody if it's restricted too much beyond the programs that they have. That's her concern. But her concern, the broad concern of that type of housing is not unfounded in any way. She's just not sure if they can accommodate it with that kind of a string on it. And she's afraid that the money, that part, so let's say there was 10%, 200,000 that couldn't be used in that manner, that 200,000 might not get used at all. And that was her concern.
Did anyone else reach out to Jessica? Okay, so I see Councilman Freeman, I saw your hand go up first.
Yeah, I had a pretty similar conversation as Councilman Strawn did, and I think it's, we had an interesting discussion, and it's hard, it's hard because I feel kind of the same way that about the conversation we were just having with the stadium district, is like there's a very high and desperate need to meet the housing needs of extremely low income people. So, my instinct is, when we finally have money, ARPA money that's going toward housing, my instinct is, oh my gosh, let's make sure that this is meeting the most desperate, highest need in our community. So, and I understand what Jess is saying too, that it's a program that's running the way that it is. And, they're doing a great job at making housing available. And the way that she phrased it to me was, it's kind of the demographic that they're working with is people who are almost homeowners, but just need a little push or a stroke of good luck. They need to, find a house that's a great deal. And so I wonder if there's a way to allocate the money where it could be, where maybe putting some of the money into this program that already exists makes sense. And I wonder if some of the money going to, you know, maybe like land that's stewarded by a different affordable housing organization or something like that, where it could maybe, you know, it could be still from the land bank, but stewarded by somebody, you know, I don't know legally how that would work. I'm just kind of talking out loud here, because here we are again with another conundrum where it's like, okay, we have this money, we have this desire to make the community better, and like how can we do that while also ensuring that there's not people living on the street tonight, which we know there are. We know that there are people experiencing homelessness, literally living under bridges. And it's hard for me to just say, okay, finally we have millions of dollars, but it's only going toward like middle-class people who are like almost ready to buy a home. You know, I wonder, like, is there a way that we can do both of those things at the same time? So those are my thoughts.
Any other comments on this subject? Councilwoman Riley?
I know Gio had his hand up that he also met with her. I have a meeting on the books tomorrow. And my thing, as you guys have heard before, is that yes, we like projects that are existing, but it's time to reimagine new things. And that's what this ARPA funding is about. Forming partnerships with agencies and organizations that may not have the bandwidth or the infrastructure that the land bank has, so that they can then turn their lens to support and sustain the lower income families that are in need. Yes, Jess may not be able to provide a home to someone that's not creditworthy, but we do have agencies that are. So that would then require a partnership for the land bank to become a mentor of sorts to these agencies. And I'm all about reinvestment and reimagining, because we use that phrase quite a bit. And so this would then require some reaching back to make sure we are reaching out to the least of these. So again, Jess and I have talked quite often, but I'm going to follow up with a conversation with her. Again, I hate that we are meeting tomorrow instead of having this conversation on Monday. We do know that there were technical difficulties, but again, my goal is not to, I'm all about housing. Okay, in the last meeting we had where the land bank partnered here in the 3rd district, I talked about the city putting dollars behind the congratulatory efforts to really support it. And here we are. And so now, as the donors, as the grantors, I think we have the ability to add little stipulations that will also then support the needs of smaller entities that are not yet able to procure CDBG funding necessarily, but will be able to lean upon the land bank to not only expand the capabilities of the land bank, but expand the capabilities of these organizations as well. So once I talk to Jess, I will email everyone and we can have our discussion via email, but it is work day. So Lord knows who will be able to read and review before our 6 o'clock meeting, but we'll do our best.
Other comments? Anything else on pending legislation we want to discuss? Is there any other discussion for anything else? Seeing and hearing no one, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.